I'm Nance, and I talk a lot on the internet in spaces where I'm safe from the eyeballs. But being confronted with the eyeballs is very difficult. So thank you all for terrifying me. I had the privilege to get acquainted with a book called Embracing Alienation over the last few weeks. And then we had some conversation with some friends, and I kept going back to Levinas and trying to explain my version of Levinas as opposed to the Levinas that exists in the popular imaginal. And I saw some failings, and I decided I'm not going to make recourse to names. I'm just going to say the thing, and it's going to be my version of it. And I don't need to do citations. I don't need to do things the right way. Now, I get to do that because I'm not part of institutions. I am just a dude. I mean, that itself is also horrifying. That's like a symbolic position. It's weird and it's difficult to...
Oh no.
And I'm done, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, the symbolic identity. It is terrifying, and it's something we kind of carry around with us. We can't get outside of it. I mean, it provides the kind of basis for society, for culture, for belonging, but it also kind of eradicates the us that we think we are. And it's kind of that, like, the interplay between the us that you are seen as and the us, or the self that you are and the self that you're seen as, or you're taken as, or you're reduced to, or you're totalized into, or whatever. That tension, that contradiction is us. But we all know this. And I had the fantasy of coming in here and speaking and doing the thing. But again, I'm struggling right now. I'm going to read some notes, and then I'll probably be done. And yeah, I'm just going to look down at my phone and read, so I apologize. Levinas, he's a dude, or he was a dude. He's dead now. Just another name in the long list of them that people like me use to sometimes convey a complex point, a sort of shorthand to be used when in appropriate company. Sometimes these names are used to cover a lack. We aren't as well-read as we think or act like we are, so we use well-known names we're somewhat familiar with to try and avoid admitting that we can't get into the details. And sometimes we use these names simply to impress the unwashed, or seemingly so, masses. From here on out, forget that I ever said Levinas. Can I curse? Okay. Fuck you. That's right, I said it. I've always imagined that someday I'd find myself in the position of having an audience, having a platform, having the assurance, or at least the impression, that I could speak and the world would listen. That's stupid, that's narcissistic, that's structurally stultified, which is an inside joke that is lost on you all. And I enjoyed that. Nevertheless, that's been my OJA, having my voice heard. I never really stopped to think about what I'd say when I finally achieved this great feat. Maybe because I knew deep down that I'd never achieve it. Maybe because I'm too stupid to think that far ahead, even in my fantasies. A few months ago, Dave asked me to think that far ahead, and I drew a blank. But the other night, I figured it out. Fuck you. That's what I'd say if the world was listening. Why? Who gives a shit? Well, clearly I do. I'm the one who's trying to work these things out. The other night, Will and I talked about the chip, the brain chip, the brain-computer interface, this kind of technology that offers pure positivity and perfect identification. I spend a lot of time trying to convince people that I'm not an accelerationist. I wrote the Cyber Luddite Manifesto, or I'm working on writing the Cyber Luddite Manifesto. But I think that might just be this kind of negation. The fact that I say, I'm not an accelerationist, I'm not an accelerationist, I'm not an accelerationist, well, that means I must be an accelerationist. And I must be embarrassed about it. But I think I maintain some kind of naive hope that technology can kind of set us mostly free from toil and from necessity and kind of open up, not a utopian future, but a future predicated on honoring the time energy of the subject, honoring kind of the subject as they are, not just a producer-consumer, but a singularity, a virtual potential, a young child who might become a violin virtuoso, might become someone who talks in circles on the internet, might become a plowshare or a dude in a field, might become whatever, and it kind of doesn't matter, but it is the fact that it's a virtual potential rather than an instantiated, right now, produce, consume. And that world still involves toil and still involves necessity. I am actually not a utopian. But maybe it is naive to believe that we can get there via technology. But I do want the brain chip. My friend Will and I were having this discussion, and we stumbled upon the horrifying realization that when we have the brain chip, interiority will no longer be a thing. There will be a perfect identification of the subject and the symbolic identity, and that will break psychoanalysis. I wrote a bit in my notes about psychoanalytic perverts. I apologize, I'm not accusing anyone of being one. But not only will it break psychoanalysis, not only will it break the distance, the repression, the disavowal, the foreclosure or whatever, because it'll just be undeniable. The thing will be the thing itself. It'll also break, I think, the kind of ethical dimension. And again, I'm going back to Levinas, which I shouldn't maybe do. But I think it is that kind of ethical dimension, the fact that we are split. And I mean, you could come at it materially, which I think is appropriate to do. You could also kind of come at it socially. You could come at it the fact that humans are animals. We are these meat bags. We are these kind of metabolic processes. But we also have the symbolic. We also have the signifier. And that together produces a contradiction, because I poop, I reproduce, but I think and I love and I hope and I dream. And that's kind of weird. You don't want to be thinking about poop and love at the same time, although some people do. But that impossible identification, that non-identification, that non-relation is the space that opens up this kind of ethical dimension and allows us to bear the burden of being human. And again, going back to, I'm not an accelerationist. An awful lot of people talk about the psychoanalysis of AI. Is it possible? Will it be possible? Will it ever emerge? I think, depending on your definitions, well, that's it. Like, we don't necessarily want to sit around and play with definitions all day long. So I think it makes sense to say, are we talking about human intelligence? Are we talking about machine intelligence? What is intelligence? What is the human? Blah, 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 this and that. I always find myself coming back to the question of what is a human? What does it mean to be human? Earlier, the kind of question of nature was raised, and similarly, I think that's a kind of complex question too. I think the human is a part of nature is a part of human, blah, 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 this and that. But we are moving into the future, and so talking about power, talking about crises, I think we are at a moment where, for me anyway, reckoning with the question of what is human matters more, because I don't think humans have power. Right now, I think we're in the paperclip maximizer, and I know a lot of people want to reject that too, and I could unpack it and I could convince you all, but I'm not going to take the time to do so. But I think the question of what is human as we kind of approach a post-human future, a transhuman future, an anti-human future, I don't know. And again, maybe I'm naive, being preoccupied with the question of the human. But I'm not looking for belonging. I'm not looking for identification. I do think it rests on this ethical space. I do think it rests on the inability to relate to the other, but nevertheless go out into the wilderness and bear your burden and bring your backpack of hopes and dreams and broken hearts and hate and poop. And try to meet the other, not on an equal playing field, but on an open field, maybe a clearing, and kind of navigate all that stuff. And I think that alienation, that estrangement, that inability to have that kind of perfect identification between the self, between the other, and the symbolic identity, that's why it relates to alienation. And I think I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think you're eligible for the prize.
What was that?
It was, I've got 350 left on my time, so 15 minus 350, you know, I think about 11 and a half minutes, so you're well in, so no problem.
Speedy Gonzalez.
I'll note this down. Okay. Next speaker.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. It's great to be here, and it's an honor. My name is David McCarricker, and I know we're not supposed to promote our books here. Not our own books, right? But Todd wrote a book, and I know he really hates when you promote his books, but I have a reason for promoting the book he just wrote on embracing alienation. It's an ulterior sort of motive. Besides the sort of inherent transgression of promoting Todd's book when he put the ban on promoting books. If you like that voice, if you think that's a great voice, he narrates it on Audible. That's why he got well acquainted with it. And Todd was like, can you actually understand what I'm saying when you're reading it aloud? But he reads it before he reads it. So he read it twice just to get it up there. And so Audible is for working class autodidacts Netflix. Right? That's Netflix. People who listen to the whole Dune series or the whole Game of Thrones series or the entirety of Todd's book are probably not like us. And when I'm using that royal us here, that we, meaning in academia, which I sort of am still, for now. So I'm going to turn on the webcam here. It's an image that I want to explain. But explaining this image is sort of like what I'll give instead of the talk. Because the talk, I think, to properly do it and to really do you all, I don't know, what I think I feel responsible to do to actually make my case is impossible given the constraints of the situation we are in. Okay, we have a conference here, right? And it's a radical, egalitarian collective. And this is my first time being here, and I want to be very respectful of the norms before I figure out which ones can be actually transgressed without where we all share in that he did that. I don't know yet which norms I can transgress yet, so I'm just gonna play by the rules. And but I'm pretty sure that saying that there's an audiobook doesn't actually constitute some kind of inherent transgression. I'm merely joking. But I would like to challenge you all, to challenge me. How can I challenge you to challenge me in a way that actually matters or is meaningful when I have to keep it under 15 minutes? You see, TED Talks are 20 minutes. And that's what normies go to. Normies who don't read books usually, or very much, or anything outside of the Amazon bestsellers list, they need it to be down to 20 minutes. 15 minutes is for me like about as castrating as we could possibly get. I do like to talk, but I also like to breathe. I feel constrained. But we all feel constrained, and constraints and limitations, especially self-imposed limitations, are the essence of freedom. If we are to go with German idealism, especially in Todd's unpacking of it for me. Not that I'm an expert on German idealism, but I really do like everything I've heard from Todd and read from Todd on the topic of self-imposed limitations being the essence of freedom. And I imagine the collective here has imposed those constraints, and so it's my job to conform to that mold. Get with it. Figure out what is the wavelength you're all on, and how can I roll with you guys. I want to get looped in on it enough so that those of you who are the most serious, critical, rigorous kinds of thinkers and interlocutors are able to do so with me in a way that is not a waste of my time, my energy, my effort, my attention, or yours. Right? And I think at the end of the day, we all want to get through this pretty quick so that we have a sense of what we're here for. So we have a sense of who to follow up with, when, and how, and why, and where. And in a lot of cases, you won't know until 6 months later. You'll be like, who is that shouty dude walking around at the front of the room? Something he said stuck with me. And you'll know where to find me. And you'll know where to email me and challenge me. And what I would like to be challenged on by you all is comfort and the horizon of possibilities and the relations of production and the mode of production and how your position in the relations of production might just change your sense for which kinds of comfort are preferable. Which kinds of comfort, for instance, is it uncomfortable if I come stand behind you while I'm talking? Is that uncomfortable? What about if I start to take my shirt off? Would that be uncomfortable?
Do it.
I don't even care, dude. I'll strip down right now. I'm not going to lay on my back and growl into a microphone like Nick Land or something, but I do want to make it, memorable here, right? So, oh wait, can someone fix that?
Yeah.
I do need to pull that up. Okay. Comfort. Different people have different kinds of comfort. And people who, like me, did a great job at college. People who got A's on everything, graduated with honors, cum laude, blah, blah, blah. We, if I'm to generalize, and I am going to, I think we have different kinds of expectations when it comes to comfort than everyone else in society. And our job here, our function here at the university, or a conference that is in relation to the university, is to reproduce the relations of production, to rationalize them, to legitimate them, to naturalize them, to normalize them. We are a special kind of person. We get to have these kinds of conversations. Other people don't. So this is where I get on my slippery slide down into working class identity politics. Whee! Splash. Except that I don't want to do workerist identity politics. I really don't. But we kind of have to. So Mikey wrote this piece called Wage, Labor, and Jouissance. Hands up if you read it. Oh my God, come on, what the? 1, 2, 3. For real? Everybody's like, oh, we gotta listen to the workers. Someone writes. So you gotta read it! I've been trying to get Slavoj Žižek to read it for a long time, actually. I've tried like every 6 months to a year. He's a busy guy. He had the time to write a foreword for my book. Amazing. He had the time to write an amazing blurb for Mikey's upcoming one. Fantastic. The problem is that, like, to be like, yeah, that's great, is one thing, and to actually read and engage with it and think deeply about it is another thing. And Slavoj, look, he's a busy guy. He's not going to be able to do it. I want genuine, critical, rigorous engagement from you all, right? We are all either Slavoj's children or adjacent to them. And so in that sense, it's all on us to read Wage, Labor, and Jouissance. But I don't really expect any of you have the time for that. Or the energy for that. So I'll give you the short version, which is to say that workers have a different form of enjoyment, and different workplaces have different sort of norms, right? That's not a crazy idea. Every office space kind of develops its own sort of norms, and then the kinds of ways that we can transgress the rules, right? Those become a part of the norms. And in that piece, Mikey compares working at an arcade, a barcade, as a bouncer. And he compares working at the barcade as a bouncer to working in a warehouse with blue-collar workers. Okay? Very different demographics. One, I think you said, is a lot more Zoomers, right? The barcade is a lot more Zoomers, pop culture Zoomers. The inherent transgression is making fun of the customers when you close, right? So in service industries, you close up shop and then you make fun of all those beautiful, wonderful, perfect people who are coming through all day. No, not just the Karens or whatever. No, actually the people who are like great, you don't have a problem with them, but you still make fun of them. What is going on? Why is that true? Well, I mean, he talks about it in his piece, but I think you all are Lacanian enough to imagine the reasons why. But the blue collar is another deal altogether. That's the one where it's like racist jokes, right? Everybody's ribbing one another. No one at the barcade would have ever called Mikey fat. But bring him around some blue-collar motherfuckers and, oh, now he's the fat one and he's the Mexican one and she's the, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to get kicked out of here, so I won't repeat any of these jokes. But if you want to maybe do a little alien anthropology, you get a cool little insight into what's going on in this world, I think, by reading that piece. So there's different kinds of enjoyment. But enjoyment is related to fantasy and desire, right? Fantasy and desire. What is the fantasy or desire that props up these kinds of inherent transgression? In a lot of cases, it comes down to comfort. I think we all have some kind of comfort fantasy. Self-care and self-help and business success literature takes on a variety of approaches to that. And Michael Easter's book here, The Comfort Crisis, kind of counts as all three of those. Self-help, self-care, business success. He says the problem is that we're all too comfortable. People are on their phones too much these days, right? Well, I wanted to bring that into dialogue with Lacan here. And so Anne and I, this is my wife Anne, by the way, everybody. My wife and I, we both, before we were married actually, we were, in 2023, we were co-teaching. Was this 2023 or was this last year?
23.
Okay, 2023. We did this duo lecture. It's on YouTube. You can just go watch it there. It's not a secret. We're not trying to hide it from anybody. And the lecture starts with Anne giving a presentation on Michael Easter's book, the comfort crisis. And all you really need to know about the book, besides the fact that he thinks we're all too comfortable right now, is that his solution for that is for us to go do something difficult. Ooh, wow. Too bad psychoanalysts don't tell us that, right? No, I'm just joking. I'm joking, obviously, because that's kind of crazy. We were all always doing difficult things, are we not? But there's a class kind of distinction here between the kinds of challenges that we take on and the ones that are forced on us. That was like the least satisfying slap I've ever given at a talk. Wow. Hold on, let's try over here. Hey, we found it. So, how long do I have? 2 minutes. The pleasure principle is what we're talking about when we talk about comfort. And comfort is not the same thing as relaxation. And the middle class fantasy of a certain kind of comfort, that on someone's horizon of possibilities, sometimes that's really crazy and delusional. It's crazy and delusional if your fantasy of comfort cannot be fulfilled in pretty much, I guess, this universe wherein capitalism is in whatever stage you want to try to call it. Neo-feudal or late or whatever. The point is, those of us responsible for maintaining and reproducing the relations of production that keep alive and well a mode of production that demands and forces Congolese child slavery and kid soldiers, right? The mode of production that we're all here keeping alive and well, maintaining and reproducing. Of course, we try to stop that, but we do. We do. The fact that you sat in the front of your class, or 2 seats back so you didn't look too overeager because you're trying to play it cool, but you nodded and you took notes whenever authority spoke. And then you were rewarded for doing that. And now you get to do what you want, not for profit, and not for mere survival, not just for a job. All of us, we play this role in the reproduction of the relations of production, which rationalize, legitimate the mode of production. Now, we can be anti-capitalists, but because we are these A-earning people with the right to speak, the socially legitimated position to speak on behalf of others, our expectations and habitus that low-key, regardless of our explicit anti-capitalist positions, enforce those relations of production through meritocracy, is what I want to highlight. Now, you all know this. I don't think this is news to anybody that there's Congolese slave trade. I don't think this is news to anybody that we want to upset the reproduction of that situation, right? We don't want to participate in that. Well, how do we challenge it? There's a lot of ways. But I want to just say that though I have a problem with Michael Easter acting like we can all go out into the Alaskan bush for 3 months, right? He's acting like we can all go do that. I have a problem with that. Of course I do. I also have a problem, I think, with Lacanians or Lacan. I don't know where to put responsibility. I'll just blame Mikey. I have this sense, because he taught me Lacan. So, nothing I think or say is his fault, but also I'll blame him anyway. Or thank him. It's the same thing. Blaming, thanking. Depends on the parallax shifts we take here. See, I don't have time. So what I want to do is point out that I have stuff I want to say about the relation between the pleasure principle, desire, and drive, and how that's classed, and how the unconscious is not language. It's like language, if we're going to be Lacanians about it. It's like language, but which kind of language is it like? Is it purely Saussurean? Or is it something that's actually having to do with the equipmental totality, right? The equipmental totality of assignments, right? We are in the relations of production, atop a mode of production, and that matters more than the purely linguistic to me, right? Well, all of the shade that I can throw on Lacanians misses if I'm wrong. And I wrote a little piece here back when I was working at Amazon in
We'd
2023.
have to wind down.
We're there?
To give the public a chance.
Oh, are we at time?
to Talk to you.
Yeah.
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 One went off.
Oh, it did go off?
It went off.
Oh, I didn't know it went off. Sorry, guys. Well, the QR codes tell you the rest, so there you go. Thank you.
Okay, questions up here?
Thank you all for your presentations today. And thanks, David, for that dramatic presentation. I'm not sure that I understood where it was going. Maybe you ran out of time, so I'll give you some chance to elaborate if you want. But if you're getting at that we, this collective we, in the stage of capitalism that we're in now, are approaching living up to the pleasure principle, kind of like, it's been a while, but like kind of like the characters in WALL-E, where like everything is just delivered to them, and they subsist on this very low threshold of exertion of energy. I mean, from my own personal experience, and it took me a long time to realize this, every time I would approach some sort of comfort, whether in a job or with a salary or whatever it was, I self-sabotaged. Every time I was about to level up, I just dropped right back down. And it took me a while to realize, oh, death trap, okay. And I wonder if, the big critique of America is that we are like those characters from WALL-E. And I wonder if the Trump resurgence might not be a collective death drive to push us all into discomfort. And I'll leave it at that.
I think the main thing here is self-overcoming or self-undermining, and how there's a kind that can be, say, help us embrace a kind of alienation that's good. I hate to use normative language, but more preferable than not. Like, I would prefer that it's the kind that makes me look fit than the kind that makes me eat as much pizza as I do, right? But we don't get to choose our vices; they choose us, right? But as far as the self-overcoming goes, I guess my main point I don't know how much this applies in the clinic or how relevant it would be for psychoanalysts, but for Michael Easter at least, I'll just say, being forced to work a wage job is itself a self-overcoming. And so then the comfort we do outside of the wage job when you're exhausted, when you're trying to recoup your time, it can't be the kind that runs a marathon. Blue-collar workers can't run marathons on the weekend, and they definitely can't do what Michael Easter thinks, which is go to the Alaskan bush for 3 months. That's much we could manage. Anyone who's got a serious future in academia, you can probably go do that in the summertime. And so the point is he doesn't realize that, or at least he writes the book like he's unaware of it. How much does that critique also apply to a lot of Lacanian discourse? I actually don't know. And so my main big ask that I wanted to close on is just that people will send me papers that are tangentially related to this. Because I go looking for things and I can't find all of the stuff. And some of you maybe have ideas. Thank you.
Question down the...
Yes. Hi, Jet. I wanted to thank you for having a paper, and I really appreciated it. I thought it was really good. And I wanted to ask you. You opened it up with the point about saying that both left and right in contemporary political circles engage in the process of attempting to accumulate power through unveiling power. So this was an interesting sort of precedent to be able to begin, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to elaborate on this because I thought it was an interesting point.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I kind of anticipated somebody that would ask me this, but I honestly don't really have a great answer for it, which is unfortunate. But I will say that one of my big references for this paper was a book by Lacan Encounters, which is Disavowal. Came out recently. I think everybody should read it. but she makes this nice dynamic between denialism on the right and how, you know, they tend to look at conspiracy theories, and like conspiracy theories are basically about like this invisible network of power that I was talking about that's supposedly like running the show. So you put yourself into this denial of official forms of power, but then you're also supposedly positioning yourself to, like, you know, overtake power or whatever. You know, maybe think about the taking of the Capitol that was attempted, right? But then, like, more official liberal, like centrism, will look at disavowal like, I know exactly how power runs. It's just like kind of like this smooth running machine, and I can like manipulate it basically the way I want to. But this is also like a form of disavowal, I think, that doesn't allow failures to really happen. But it's by not allowing, it disallows failures to happen precisely by being able to point them out, right? So what I was trying to think about here is like, how do we not try to exist in the center, like some kind of neutral area? Obviously know that antagonism is insurmountable, but maybe do something like the way that Bernie Sanders kind of took voters from the right, brought them over to the left in a sort of way like that. And I think maybe naively we should try to just take power. That's kind of what I'm saying. Like, but why should we do that? I think it's because we can fail. I think that's what the left is good at. So why not just embrace that, really? I mean, and also maybe one of the things we should do less is to speculate less over like what the right is. Like, let's not use all of our theoretical tools to do that, right? Let's use our theoretical tools to take power and fail and then figure out what we did. So.
That's good.
Hi. So there's something that I'm experiencing here, which I can identify with, and that is my own experience of precarity in the academy, and which for me produced like somatic effects. I had heart surgery because and I blame this on the academy. And actually, I had a lot of anger about this. What I recognize in this, and what actually even informs my, I actually am students in the room. So here's the confession that you don't get to hear, but which I think you would appreciate even, is that a certain kind of hystericization of discourse intervenes when one is thrust into the position of actually being the subject presumed to know. And that's actually, for me, has been a double bind and an authentic response. But I actually hear this as an undercurrent that may be going on in all three talks, and I think, Jet, you could talk this equally. It's not a question that comes from Lacan, but a question that comes from that friend of psychoanalysis, as he describes himself, or maybe the frenemy of Lacan, Derrida, and his reading of In the Gift of Death, which is, I think, one of his best pieces, where he situates the question of listening to the voice between Kierkegaard and Levinas. And his assertion is that listening to the call of the other always means ignoring the call of some other, which, Jet, you seem to just be saying right now. But the question for us in critique is, how do we know what voices to ignore? And how do we deal with the ethical costs of choosing not to listen to some voices? And I think that for me, I'm hearing that question come out of this panel in many different forms. So I thought that would be a nice way of setting, because to bring it back to Lacan, there we're also faced with that fundamental question we experience in the analytic experience, the difference between demand and desire, and our inability sometimes to tell the difference between those two things. This seemed like fecund ground for you all to be in dialogue with each other.
Yeah.
I think you want to respond to me.
I don't. I do.
Yeah. I was demanding.
I just issued
I do desire it.
So can you experience my question not as a demand, but as an invitation to our mutual desire?
Yeah, I think that's terrifying. Like that question is terrifying. And that's another, I don't know, moment of uncertainty and ambiguity. And I think that's where the kind of freedom lies, and I think that's where, like, answering that question is impossible. Like, every time you enter this ethical dimension, it is a singular thing. And the terror lies not just in the kind of call of the other, but in the fact that, like, this is it. These are the stakes of my humanness, our humanness, human congress upon the face of the earth. I think you have to, and it's probably dysfunctional, and it doesn't work. So maybe that's this ideal that you tie to a kite string and set it free, and it guides you and you hold on to it, and you never even achieve it. Like you just know, well, that's my guiding principle. I'm broken, I'm stupid, I'm lazy, I'm selfish, I'm gonna fail. But that's me, and that's my burden, and that's my responsibility, and that's why it's beautiful. I think it's also, like, a part of me is kind of just rejecting answers in general. I think I got tired of myself trying to come up with answers, and I don't know. I'd like to hear. Thank you very much.
Anybody else want to respond?
Yeah, I'd like to. Okay. I think maybe what your question is relating to is, like, where's the voice of authority? Like, who gets to decide who says what, and how does it have, like, a truth value and things like that. But what I was trying to triangulate in my talk is that, like, authority just fails. That it always does, and that's really what we're looking for when we're trying to talk about power, I think. Mm-hmm. So, like, how do you position yourself within this knowledge that authority is definitely going to fail? And I think what we need to do is, like, look for the contradictions in, like, these systems that we create to decide what's true, what's not, which voices are valid, which voices are not. And it's totally tricky, and it's not. For example, you could say that there are obviously voices that are marginalized, but then it's easy to fetishize that, I think, and to make that into to where that you reward victimization, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you, I don't have, like, a great answer for this, and I'm kind of just going to repeat what I said earlier, is that, like, again, we should just take authority and, like, make it fail, and then do it again, right? And I think that's just the best way that we can, like, really learn how to grapple with these times that are almost, like, inscrutable, really.
You're also one more question over here.
Thank you. Jet, we've been talking a bit about your paper already, but I can't remember if I've already raised this point, so apologies. But I was interested in the observation you made about Trump saying that pointing the emperor's nakedness maintains his status. And I was thinking about that. There's all this kind of liberal pearl clutching about, oh, he's degrading the dignity of the office and all this kind of business. Yeah. And I was wondering whether, in your mind, or whether you could relate it to another Zupancic reference in the book on comedy, about the difference between true comedy and false comedy. Yeah. And the example she has, the priest walks down the road and falls over. If you laugh because he's a priest that's fallen over, then it's this kind of reactionary false comedy, because you're maintaining symbolic authority as kind of being preserved. But if you laugh when the priest gets up and tries to carry on as if he hasn't fallen over, then you see kind of I think is that where you find the concrete universal? That bit I get confused about. But you see how the kind of authority fails. Yes. And I was wondering how your kind of, your observation about Trump either relates to or complicates that kind of model that Zupancic is talking about in relation to authority.
That's interesting to think about. It maybe, like, the way that the left takes power is through, like, kind of a comical reversal of, like, whatever Trump is doing. I'm not really sure what that means, but it sounds really nice.
We probably have time for one, I think.
Yeah, this is a question for all three panelists, who all in your own way related to issues of power, about how to kind of situate working class politics in these different ways, and maybe I seem too orthodox in this way, but I'm curious, like, what's your relationship to the concept of the party? I mean, you talk about how to determine what voices are legitimate or not. Mao says no investigation, no right to speak, right? You have to do the research, the critical inquiry, and then once you develop an authoritative opinion, then you're granted the authority. And I think, it's a very 20th century mode of kind of organizing thought and criticism and action, but it does have a structure and it does embed a sort of intellectual project within it. And I'm kind of curious what your relationship to that is.
Who of you would like to respond?
I often joke that I'm the one living Posadist. And to be honest, I think I am living through a moment of doubt and pessimism, maybe, and I can't see my way out of that right now. I think that would be my attempt at an honest answer to that question.
Can I say something?
I think we've exhausted the time, but please, yeah, sorry, you go ahead.
Just one more for that. I think maybe party politics is a good way to go, but from what I was trying to get at also in my paper is that the masses really, I don't think, know what they want. And I think honestly, they really will just try to self-destruct left to their own devices. And also as far as like study, I'm totally opposite. I'm here, I think it's completely important, but also I think we all have to realize that we're doing like a leap of faith no matter what and trying to say that we do have some kind of authority, right? And maybe that like leap of faith is kind of part of a party politic, I'm not sure. But like there's no guarantee that you're gonna have authority for what you say. And you have to make, and that's what I mean by a leap of faith. There's always like this kernel of contingency that you're not gonna be able to deal with fully.
Thank you very much. Coffee and conversation available outside. Thank you.
I'm speaking.